the 15th, 16th? What?
It's the 16th day.
Okay. Ready?
Yep, go ahead, whenever you're all set.
I'm Murrietas Boyce. This is October 16th, 2007. And we're going to do a little oral history here this morning. I'm following a list of questions provided. And the first question is about how long I lived in Murrieta. I was born in 1934, and I lived there till I was 16, 1950. And my family then moved to Fallbrook. But because it's where I grew up, it's like where home is, you know. So my interest in the history was maintained because of that reason. Favorite memory of Murrieta? Lots of favorite memories, but in talking with other friends of my same age group, we really enjoyed the Murrieta Hot Springs. For one thing, they had a beautiful plunge there. That's where I learned to swim when I was 12 years old. And didn't get to go there very often, but it was a beautiful facility, a resort run by the Gunther family. And you know, it hired a lot of Murrieta's people, so it was a good resource for finding jobs in that period of time.
Did you know them personally, or
the Gunthers? Yes, my family knew them better than I because I was a girl.
Okay.
You know, and they were friends through the Gunthers supported the Boy Scouts. And my dad was a scoutmaster, and my grandmother worked out there, so they were acquainted with all of my family more than me. Because I was young. That plus at the school, you know, it was such a small town, we didn't have a lot of activities, but the school is big in a lot of our memories because of the activities. The teachers managed to keep a lot of neat things going throughout the year, so you always had something to look forward to. Every holiday, someone mentioned to me, even Columbus Day was you know, something worth celebrating, and we were given little poems to memorize and songs we had to learn, and then we'd have a show in our school auditorium. There was a stage, and so we learned to perform for the community, and everybody would come. I mean, there wasn't a lot going on, so if something was happening in school, people would come.
Yeah, it was a big event.
Right. So we remember those things, and because Halloween is coming up right now, I just remember that as being a real fun party. And my mom really got into doing us up, and we often won the prizes for the best costumes, and she'd just start from scratch and make us into something really funny. In those days, it was okay to blacken your face with a burnt cork and cold cream, you know, and so I remember she made me up looking like that, and she'd stuff our pillows, you know, around our bellies so that we looked so different we couldn't be identified. And that was fun. They'd have a parade, and then the best costumes and all got prizes, and it was just fun to look forward to. And then, of course, the next big, really special thing is we always had a Christmas tree in the auditorium, and all the kids in the school, by grade levels, drew names on who they were going to provide a little gift for at the Christmas party. And so Santa Claus came, and your name was called, and you didn't know who had your name, and you know, it was just kind of fun, something fun to look forward to every year. And there was always Christmas program, plays. We had to memorize our parts and be in plays, and sometimes even our parents were in plays. The PTA would put on performance. I remember my mom being in one of those, and you know, being my mom, I was used to her being the boss and everything. She was kind of funny in the play, and that was entertaining to me to see her in a different kind of light. Christmas at the church too. The main church in Murrieta was a Methodist church. The other two churches were smaller churches, and they didn't have as many events as the Methodist church did. And so the Methodist church also had a Christmas tree, and I think there our families placed gifts under the Christmas tree for us. And we always had the Christmas story, the the men and boys dressed as the shepherds and the kings and the whole thing and the whole biblical story about Christmas. And then at the end, Santa Claus came and parceled out all the gifts. And so that was fun. And really, we at the door going out, there was this big crate full of Washington State apples. And I guess we didn't get so many apples in that day. I mean, now we take it for granted you can have all kinds of apples. At Christmas time, we had these big red apples, and they came wrapped in red tissue paper, individually wrapped. And you open that box, and the aroma that came out, you know, it was just such a delicious, tempting thing. And we each got an orange and an apple and some nuts. And I remember hard candies in a little box with string over, like you get your animal crackers in. You know, and that was Christmas. It was so special. I mean, you thought we just had a gold, you know, something very special given to us. And so those are some of my favorite memories. But there are just lots.
You mentioned the two other churches. Do you remember what denominations they were at all?
One was a Pentecostal church. And they had, I think, Sunday evening meetings and Wednesday meetings. And they were kind of, you know, the Holy Roller style. One thing that intrigued me about them was they had a brass band that played the music. They, you know, at our church, the Methodist church, we had a piano and an organ. And at this church, they had a trombone and a saxophone and a horn, and you know, and so and the music was real jazzy, tapping music and stuff like that. And they, my grandmother would take me to those sometimes. So, and another church was more of a, I would say, type of Assembly of God type of church in that. And they weren't always active. Sometimes the church was just there, empty. And other times there would be a pastor and they would begin services again and so forth and so on. And there was nothing for the Catholics in Murrieta. And so the Catholics, I believe, had to go to Temecula for their services. And so
it's pretty diverse in religions. I mean, you know, Catholics, Presbyterians, Methodists. I mean,
there were Protestants.
Thank you.
There weren't anything but these three little churches, and they were all very small congregations.
So then most of the events in town just revolved around school and church, pretty much, or
church, school, and the community met at the women's clubhouse, which was. You know, it could accommodate probably 100 people at an event or something. And I remember, you know, the lot where that clubhouse sat would just be crowded with cars parked every which way, you know, and the men liked to gather out on the porch and talk about, you know, solving the world's problems and all the farming problems, whatever was going on in their lives. And of course, if they were smokers, they could smoke outside. And the women were usually putting together a potluck. You know, we had so many potlucks, and one of the things that some of my friends and I really remember is when we were going to these potlucks, there were certain people in town who made certain dishes. I was talking to one friend yesterday. She told me, oh, I always looked forward to Sadie Thompson's chicken and noodles. That's something for a kid to remember. Personally, I always looked forward to Mrs. Sykes' tamale pie. And that was something my mom didn't fix. So once a month, we had church potlucks at the Methodist church, you know, and people came from all over for that. And people put themselves out to make a nice dish, you know, to bring. But one of my friends said her mother instructed her, don't you ever take any of Mrs. So-and-so's home canned green beans. And the deal with that was that could poison you if it hadn't been done properly, sealed, and all of that. So there were certain dangers. You don't want to take home canned if you didn't trust those.
The person, how they did it, or
whatever.
Interesting.
Yes, I thought that was interesting that she brought that up to me.
Well, let's talk a little bit about women's roles in the community. How big of a part did they play in keeping, family connections, events?
Well, mothers were at home. Mothers were at home until World War II. And you probably know that history, how women began to go to work out of the home at World War II. But personally, my own mother got trained in first aid by the Red Cross. And they had meetings where they just sit and fold bandages, and those bandages went to support the war effort. And they participated also in the observation buildings that we had, several locations in the city where we observed the night skies. Well, the daytime skies. They were looking for planes and identifying them, and inside these little observation booths they would have posters and posters and posters of the different kinds of planes, and at that time there weren't as many different kinds as there are nowadays. And one of those observation buildings was across from my grandmother's house, and so my brother and I would go over there if my folks were visiting Grandma on Sunday, for instance. In the afternoon we'd mosey over there, and if the place was vacant we'd sit in there and study all those posters and learn those planes. And you could also identify them by sound. And so it was the job of every observation volunteer to spend a couple of hours, however many their post was, and to make records of whatever they observed during that time. And of course the point being that you didn't want any unwanted air visitors. One of the things during World War II that affected my brother and I deeply was that there was a lot of air traffic over the valley from March Air Force Base and from the Hemet Ryan Field. And over at Ryan Field they were training, I think, the fighter pilots in small planes. And those guys, they'd come circling over Murrieta because it was big airspace, you know, big valley, and mostly in grain fields. And but every now and then one of those planes would crash. Mostly the planes, they didn't hurt anybody in the community when they fell. They fell in some place out of the way, and mostly the pilots survived. But my brother and I were witness to two P-38s coming together. And you may not know what a P-38 was, but it was a dual fuselage plane. And they were kind of unique, and they were doing their stunts. They did stunts, they did rolls, they did dives, they did all kinds of things that freak you out when you're a kid. You know, so we're watching these guys because they're doing some really interesting things, and all of a sudden they collided and fell out near Murrieta Hot Springs Road. You know, in the area where 215 goes now. There was a eucalyptus grove out there and all, and that was a bad, really bad thing. There were no survivors. But we watched all of that falling, you know, and it just, forevermore, we were afraid of the skies. You know, when there was something going on, we were watching. Didn't want to be in the way. I remember hearing that there was one fell near our grammar school, and I didn't personally witness that or remember it, and so it just takes somebody else's word. My cousin told me about that one.
Did a lot of your family live in Murrieta?
My dad's family had two brothers living in the valley, and a sister in Temecula. So our family came there in 1906. To the two-story house that sits to the south of Ivy and Washington. There's a two-story house that's in there. There's a trailer park surrounding it, so it's kind of hard to see the house, but that was my dad's birthplace.
So Ivy and Washington was the place to be at, or not? What was the center of Murrieta?
The center was at B Street.
D Street, okay.
And Washington. And the B Street south, towards the mountains, towards the hills, or the creek. That direction. You know, maybe you don't know, but where the old elevator is located now. You know where that is?
Your father worked there, didn't you?
Yeah, he had that business for quite a while. But the old community, the first community, organized right along B Street to the west of Washington. And the hotel sat at the corner of Clay and B, and right across the street from the hotel was the depot, and so that was the center of the community. Along Clay Street there was a bank, a grocery store, I think a realty, and across from where the elevator or the grain storage elevators are now, there was a building that belonged to the local pharmacy. He had a drugstore there, and he lived upstairs on the second floor. And the school was at A, between B and Calmia, and on 2nd Street. A and 2nd, between B and Calmia. There was another drugstore that was on 3rd, just south of B Street, and there were numerous. If you read the article or the chapter about businesses, it's just amazing to me how many businesses there were quickly as soon as the town was platted. It just seemed like people came and began making useful businesses. There were there was the barber, there's the doctor, several doctors, a couple of doctors, and hardware stores and.
So before all that, the town's economy pretty much did just rely off of the fountain house, the springs, ranches, and the
farms.
The farms, pretty much, not ranches.
Big farms and ranches,
and a couple
cattle ranches, and chicken farm, chicken ranches, turkey ranches. But when the train was still coming through, lots of goods went out on the train for Murrieta. We had people who were in the business of honey, so they had their little bees scattered all around. We had olive oil industry going on. They're up by the cemetery. If you've been up there, to the north is the cemetery. All these olive trees and all along there. So we had olive oil industry there. There was a dairy up there. What else? Everybody a lot of people seemed to have horses, and so you saw some pretty good horse flesh around town, and some very good riders. There was a man named Pat Samniego who was a real smart rider, and when he was on his horse, he had good horses, and he just looked so good. Walter Cooper also had nice horses, and my friend, same age as me, Joanne, lived across Catty Corner Cross, and she often was on a horse. And then there's a lady in town who was a little younger than me. Her name was Peggy Thompson, and she always had pigtails down to her waist, and away she went on her horse with pigtails flying behind her. That was, people found ways to spend time that were very entertaining and very creative use of their time. And so we were never bored. We always had activities that we found to do. It's before we had television, because our family seemed to get television early on, and I was amazed because my family was very conservative and they didn't spend their money foolishly. And when I saw TV in the house, I thought, wow, this is different. But that was not until like 1949 that we really began to see television, and actually there was so little offered. You could only get maybe two or three channels, and they didn't come on until maybe 4:30 in the afternoon, and those would be cartoons for the children, like let me see if I can think. Cecil the Sea Serpent, and I don't know. I can't think of those things right. Well, it was entertainment for children, and so if you were into the whole new television thing, if you didn't have it, your neighbor did. You could go watch with your neighbor, But we found other things to do. My brother and I had we had chores to do because my dad always had quite a lot of chickens, like 100 or 200 chickens. and sold the eggs and all of that. So we had those chores to do: feed the chickens, gather the eggs, and I personally raised a bunch of rabbits, not more than 6. But they would, breed and have their little ones, and then a truck would come when 6 weeks old or something and take all those rabbits away, and I'd get a check. See, and my brother, when a calf was born, he'd raise the calf.
Okay.
And then that was,
So did your family live in a small farm then?
Oh no, no. It was probably less than an acre, but my dad had a cow, and we had a couple of pigs, and we had all these chickens at the back end of the property, and there was always a vegetable garden, and people had to do whatever they could do to eke out a living, because being born in the early 30s, I was that group of people that were born right after that 1929 depression. It was a terrible time for people trying to find enough work to bring in food for their table and so forth. So we grew a lot of our own stuff, and we provided, if you have a cow, you've got milk, you've got butter, you've got, my mom even made cottage cheese, if you want to believe that. and because we had the chickens, we had our own eggs, we had fried chicken, we had the rabbits, we could stew a rabbit,
So
we provided for ourselves.
Was it safe to say that most people owned either a farm or had a small plot of land where it's like subsistence farming to pretty much take care of yourself?
Like you wouldn't just turn it into lawn.
Yeah.
We had lawns.
You had to utilize the property in order for food and.
That's right. To provide for yourself. And you did a lot of trading. Like I had an aunt who made wonderful butter. And so people would line up at her place to get the butter that she made, and she would trade for whatever she didn't have. And then during the wartime, when things were rationed, we had these rationing books that you had to use for sugar and gasoline, and coffee was one of the things too, and you couldn't buy nylons or silk stockings if you were a woman. There was none of that. And those things that were rationed, so if my Aunt Hazel made good butter, somebody might trade her some of their coupons for the butter if they didn't have the cash. And that way, my aunt got the extra coupons, which was useful to her, and they bartered that way. I had another aunt who always had a huge vegetable garden and fruits and nuts and things, because they had a 5-acre parcel, and so their family did that too. And so they could trade eggs and probably chickens for frying and that sort of thing. We killed our own chickens and did all that slaughtering. Like the calves that my brother raised were always slaughtered and we had a freezer in Elsinore. They used to have these companies that were just freezer companies, and they'd provide you with they'd provide you with a freezer, and you probably paid a monthly something on it, and when you were ready to go get some wrapped meat, you just go up there to your freezer box, because we didn't have freezers at home.
So after the war, after World War II, how did the economy change? I mean, was it still like that, or was it like when all the soldiers came back? How did the economy change? Did it become, how did the city change after that? Did it start, if you can remember?
Well, for one thing, women continued working outside the home. Once they got their independence and got out there working in the plants, whatever kind of plants they were working in, or at the telephone company, or whatever kind of job they got, they often kept working. It was additional income for the family, and so I think that was a turnaround point in the early 1940s where women left the home. One thing I wanted to tell you is that we didn't have any fast food. There was no such thing. In a lot of cases, in the earlier days, we had no phones. Phones were new. If you did have a phone, you had a 4-party line or or more, so that you lift up the phone to call someone and your neighbor Cora Witcher or somebody is on the phone, well, you had to hang up or listen in, whichever you chose. and a friend told me a funny story yesterday. Her family lived down from this lady named Cora Witcher, who was one of the icons of the community. When the phone would ring, it would ring 1 ring, 2 rings, 3 rings, or 4 rings, and so you knew whose ring it was. And so Cora would lift the phone, and because my friend's mother was at the post office, helping to run the post office, Cora would lift up the phone and say, "No, she's not home yet. Call later." Funny story to me. Getting back to the food thing, women cooked from scratch. If they made a cake, they cracked the eggs. They measured the flour. There were no box mixes. There were no fast food stores where you just whiz over and get Kentucky Fried Chicken and bring it home for the family. You cooked the entire thing, and you did it from scratch, and maybe from your garden, maybe from your freezer. And we had fresh milk every day because my dad come home from working all day. He milked in the morning, came home at night, milked at night. We'd have dinner. He and my brother went out into this little special place where they took care of the eggs. They cleaned the eggs on a little sander kind of belt and put them into cartons, and they weighed them so that they had designate large, medium, small, put them into appropriate cartons, and then the man would come in his truck, I don't know, probably twice a week and collect all those eggs. That was another income for the family. And but they'd sit out there until 10 o'clock at night cleaning those eggs, and my dad worked all day starting like 7 in the morning. And so people worked hard. I mean, there was not like we have, I'm going to a football game, or I'm going to, there was none of that because people had to work hard and long hours to get what they got.
Wow. So talk about a little bit about your father and where he worked in Murrieta.
Yeah, he started out trying to eke out a living as a farmer, and he because he had the 2 older brothers. My dad was the youngest of the family, and the 2 older brothers were also farming, and he tried to do partnership with them, and that was sort of successful. But he finally decided he wanted to try it on his own, so he leased a piece of property. Actually, it's a piece of property that the Murrieta offices are all sitting on right now.
Oh,
that
really?
40-acre plot.
Wow.
Was my dad leased that property for a few years, and he farmed that property, and it was fabulous because it was 40 acres. My brother and I had 40 acres to run around on during that period of time. Maybe it was only 3 years or something. It wasn't too long. But at that time, he was trying to make a living. He grew melons. He grew alfalfa. He grew corn. He grew what else did he have? Tomatoes. Anyway, all those food crops he put into the back of a pickup, and he'd take up to Elsinore and run around the neighborhoods and stop at the houses, knock on the door, and ask them if they need any produce. And he'd sell it that way. And also out at the end of our driveway, we had a little what do you call it? Where we sold.
Like a stand?
Yeah, a little farm stand where we sold the fruits and vegetables off that property.
Okay.
And the eggs and
Did you live on the plot, or was it just a plot?
We lived on it.
Okay.
And that was an interesting house. It had a long driveway that came off Kalmia. You drove in and on a gravel road, and there was a 2-room house. Each room was 16 by 16. You enter at the front room, which was the living room, the dining room, the kitchen, and then you enter from there into the bedroom. And my mom and dad had the double bed for them, the bunk beds for my brother and I, which he built himself out of pine. And the smell of that pine wood never was finished in any way. But at night when we get into bed, we smell that pine. I remember that. And then my sister was born there, so they also had a crib off to one side, and it didn't seem crowded for some reason. Don't ask me why. We managed 16 by 16 room. There was no indoor plumbing for bathroom, so we had the bathroom out behind the little outhouse out behind the garage, and we had to visit there before we went to bed at night. Finally, my dad added a shower on. It wasn't his place to do these things, you know, but because we were renters, or basically leasers. He added a shower onto the bedroom side, and that was made out of galvanized metal of some kind, and with a shed roof, and cold as can be. But we had that for a shower, and we never had indoor plumbing as far as bathroom until we moved into town.
Okay.
Because believe it or not, that was not in town.
Okay.
That was just outside of where most of the townspeople lived, because we were on 40 acres, so it was farm property.
Wow.
My dad had a crop named gyp corn, which I later learned was Egyptian corn, and it grew in a head, kind of a very full head of all these kernels, you know, probably a head 6 inches or something like that, and that was harvested and sold for farm feed. And all. Now, he got the business at the elevator in about 1942 or something. He joined with the partnership that owned it at the time. Was Howard and Barnett, and they taught him the ropes, and they were from I don't know, Corona or Pomona or something. At least they were driving in to Murrieta quite a distance every day to go to work there and run that business, and they'd had it for some time. They were ready to unload it. So they taught Daddy the ropes, and he ran that business for like 12 years then. And it was a very big business because the whole area, you consider Menifee Valley, Hemet Valley, Temecula, even Elsinore, anybody who was farming in that whole Great Valley came to store their grain there in that elevator, and that elevator had 6 big bins.
Okay.
Very deep and very scary. My brother would love to tell you all about this because he was a little bit younger than me, but Daddy used him in the summers as a helper there, and he, you know, the way it worked was a man brought his grain in on a truck, and the grain was just grain. It wasn't bagged or it wasn't anything. It was just loose grain. Back up to a chute that had an auger in it. Down at the bottom there was a place like this, about 12 inches by maybe 6 inches, something like that. Everything went into that chute, down, and the auger then took it in cups on a belt that took it up and moved it into those bins, those storage bins. Everything was weighed as it came in, and then the farmer paid for storage according to the weight that they delivered in. And so that was part of the elevator business. Daddy had to learn that. And one of the hard lessons he had to learn, I don't think anybody told him about this, or he would have been a little bit smarter, is that during the year before the grain maybe called back for seed or whatever, it shrunk. So he didn't, you know, if he wanted to use the grain, the weight wasn't the same as it was going in.
Oh, I see.
It didn't weigh as much. And so actually if the farmer called on the weight that he had brought in, he got more grain back than he had delivered in. Do you get what I'm saying?
I get exactly what you're saying.
Yeah. So that was a hard lesson to learn because it cost him money. He had to buy grain to provide for that loss. That loss in shrinkage.
So it was a loss.
Yeah, that was really tough. It was a hay and grain business, so there was a lot of crops like the alfalfa crop was a hay crop, and it was baled in wires and all and brought in. And so across from the bins was a storage place, a storage barn for all this hay that was brought in. There was oat hay and, you know, and the alfalfa was a big crop, and it was a beautiful crop. And you know, Murrieta is a very hot valley, and what I remember about driving along the alfalfa fields at the north end of the valley as you proceed up towards Wildemar, there were great big acreages planted in alfalfa, and it reduced the heat of the summer. As you drive by there, the fragrance of the alfalfa plus just all that green.
Cooling off.
And it was a crop that was watered too, so there was moisture in the ground. Oh, I remember that sort of special.
Relief.
Yes. And there was a big pump. It was the Thompson families. There were lots of Thompsons.
Okay.
And they were the ones who raised that long stretch of alfalfa in there. And they had this deep pump. And the pump ran 24 hours a day. And I don't remember it as a child personally, but people who are older than me tell me about that sound, and I write about it in the...
So was the city water, did it come from wells?
Deep wells.
Aquifers
Deep
and wells, things like that?
Yes, absolutely, in the beginning. And they didn't have a water company until much later, and that was part of my experience, and so I have it recorded in there about that. But no, every person had their own wells, and there was plenty of water. Just didn't seem like a problem.
Yeah.
But then as the community grew, yeah, you begin to experience it, and also if you have drought years and so forth. The more you draw on the aquifer, then you finally deplete. But in the beginning there was so much water, you know, it wasn't a problem. And something interesting about the first people that came into the valley, they had experiences in digging for wells where they would find like redwood. And so where did the redwood come from? You know, were there redwood
trees,
forests and so forth in the valley in the beginning? You know, that's a question. I don't know the answer.
Well, it's interesting that you said that. Well, it's kind of off topic, but they found by Don Magoni Lake. I don't know if they put that in. They found mammoths and sloths and things. They talk about the environment millions of years ago, and it was a much less, it was more temperate climate, and so it very much might have had redwoods and things like that.
It's kind of fun to think.
It is interesting. It is. It's like, wow, the landscape's completely changed.
Yeah, and you know, at the time that I began writing this book, that's when they started finding that sort of thing in Murrieta, because they started making those freeways.
Yeah.
And it uncovered things that had been lying dormant, who knows, for eons. You know, that was, to me, that was such exciting stuff. I was just real thrilled with that.
Well, how did the freeways change Murrieta? Since we went kind of on that topic. I know it's a huge topic, but
it really, you know, it was very rural in the beginning. It was just so rural and simple and everything. And of course it brought in, the freeways brought in lots of traffic and of course more community life. The stores and everything that began opening along the freeways were new to the community, and some of the old timers really resented it, and they may still, for all I know. I don't live there anymore, so it's not my experience, and the freeway experience was not my experience. It came after I left.
Okay.
You know, in the beginning we had this 2-lane paved road, and actually my dad, when he was around 9 years old or something, watched that being paved for the first time. And it was paved for the first time because the San Diego Panama exhibition was going to open in 1915, 16, 17, something like that. I have to look at my own facts to know for sure. But anyway, because of that exposition, they wanted to have a good road leading down to San Diego. And that's how that 395 got built. And he actually watched them do it. And a lot of it was poured by wheelbarrow, mixing up in a cement mixer, pouring it into wheelbarrow, and there are pictures in there that show about that construction. I think that was the beginning of the change in Murrieta from rural to perhaps there was a period of time, I think it was in the 60s, where there was a lot of horse farms, big, beautiful horses that were raised in the community. And I think it went from farming then, farming all this grain. The grain just went as far as you could see. This is a overhead that was taken in 1981, which was just prior to the biggest influx of population in the valley. And if you look at that and you see how green it is, now picture that in the springtime green, and then in the summer amber.
Oh yes.
And when we say amber waves of green, that means a lot to me. I saw it every summer. And all the harvesters and hay balers and hay rakes, and
I can see what you mean though about being cool in the summertime.
Yeah.
Just wind.
Well, this would be springtime, because usually in the summertime it was dry.
Okay.
And it was being harvested, being cut and harvested, either bagged grain or stored grain or hay bales. So that was kind of the way it was. But you can see how sparse the homes are.
Oh yeah.
They're just not a lot of homes.
Sprinkled here and there.
So if you know where the cemetery is, and you go up there on that hill and look across that valley, and just take yourself a little eraser in your imagination and erase out all that you see and put a now and then hold into it, it just has changed so quickly in the 80s and 90s.
Just I can just tell from the 1981, it's amazing. In 20 years.
Yeah, this little booklet was put out because they were celebrating 75 years, I think, in Murrieta. I'm not sure about that, but anyway. Population, it says, about 1,200 in 1981. But don't laugh, I was thinking it was 600. I'm sure I saw signs that were like that. It was just like, we knew everybody. There were no strangers in town. Now, one of the things that my girlfriends and I did after school and on Saturdays when we had some spare time was to take our skates, which were the kind that had a skate key, and we'd take our skates down to the grammar school. It had a U-shaped corridor that extended on the ends of the U, and we'd go down there and skate by the hours with our skate keys hung around our neck on a string, and we didn't worry about anybody attacking us, about drugs, we were safe.
Well, you probably didn't know anything about that stuff.
Everybody knew everybody, and you knew that you were safe.
Yeah.
And let's face it, there wasn't a whole lot of traffic going through town, so. And, interesting enough that the traffic that did come through on 395, it was a major inland highway, but 2 lanes, and so there wasn't a lot. But what did come through, their destination often was the Murrieta Hot Springs, which was a very beautiful resort spa kind of thing, known for its mineral springs, its healing waters, and its mud baths. Think about that. My dad told me that he did that once. You get in there and it's bubbling all around you, and it's hot and bubbling, and it's supposed to be a very healing kind of thing. But anyway, or their destination then would be to San Diego. And so, it was as simple as that. Just pretty simple stuff going through.
Now, in your book, I noticed you mentioned Hale Curran a lot and how important she was and influential to the community. And since you met her and talked to her, maybe you might want to talk a little bit about her and what you've experienced.
Well, I knew her all my life because she had a daughter, same age as me. And she worked in the post office, as I said in the book. And so the post office was a major meeting place because we had some rural delivery after a point in time, but for a long time everybody came in for their mail. And so they'd see each other in town and stuff, and we always saw her. And the other worker in the post office, actually, was the postmaster, was Rose Tarwater, who was also, her family was very historic in the town. And the Hale Curran, without her, I could not have done the book. And it's a major reason that I really got interested in doing it, because my dad told me about all her photographs. And she was just, it was like a hobby with her. Her little camera was everywhere. She was, and she was real interested in the ones that were important, having 8x10. So it was a lovely experience for me to visit with her and to look through her collection. And it wasn't just photographs, but like I said, it was all kinds of things. She had little, calling cards. Used to be when people called, they had their name in script or something, and they said, who it was that called. And it was a habit of people in the early days to get in their horse and buggy and go around calling on a Sunday afternoon, just calling their friends they hadn't seen for a while. And if the friends weren't at home, maybe they were out calling, you leave your calling card. And so she had things like that. She had all kinds of stuff. Because she was born into the family of the Sykes, who initially had that hotel. I shouldn't say initially, because that's not true. There was somebody else before them. I think his name was Benton or something. But anyway, because she had that hotel experience, and because the hotel burned in 1935, it wasn't a part of my experience. And to find out there was a 3-story hotel in Murrieta, I never saw a 3-story building there. And I thought, wow, that's really something. So I wanted to know all about that, and just sitting in her home with her and having her tell me those experiences, and having her describe to me blow by blow how the thing was built and how the rooms were placed. I felt like I've been there, I've seen it and felt it. I almost feel like I stayed overnight.
Well, I was reading about those chicken dinners, and I was like, wow.
For the price. Yeah, she said.
I'd wait all week myself.
Those old bachelors in town coming in and pigging out for the price. What was it?
25? It's 25. I think 25 cents.
Oh, that's just amazing. And to think that her aunt did all the cooking. I can't imagine, because the train came in, and then people got off the train at the hotel, came in for their meal, got on the train, and away they went again. And she did that 3 times a day. That's a lot of cooking. And they had a dining room that seated 20 or 30 people. I can't imagine something like that. And she really didn't have a lot of help. She played mother to Hale, because Hale lost her mother in childbirth. And so it was just the 2 of them in the hotel, and then these guests who came in. And there were certain guests who came in who were regulars. They were either, we'd call them salesmen, who came in to see, how it was going down at the grocery store and take their list of what they needed. It wasn't just a grocery store. You could go in there and buy Levi's. You could buy dress patterns. You could buy fabric. You could buy all the thread. You could buy hay hooks. Do you know what a hay hook is?
Yeah.
I mean, you could buy all the things that you needed in that one store. It was a big store, and you get in there, and they had a slab of bacon. You say how much you wanted, and they take it over and put it through, and they take off as many pounds of bacon as you want, or half a pound, or whatever. And the same with the cheese. Cheese set up on the counter. If it got a little blue on the side, they just cut it off. Yeah. And so there was a big kind of a cutter, a knife that was kind of on a hinge, and he'd just cut off however much you want, wrap it up in white butcher paper, and give it to you, and write on the price. And so many things different than now. The meat market was in a cooled counter with a window, and you could look in there. Oh, every once in a while, something would go haywire with the freezer room in the back of the store, and it smelled like ammonia. Oh, and if you go in there, I feel sorry for the people who had to work during periods like that, because the whole place reeked of ammonia. You go in there and it just sting your nasal passages until they got that fixed. Oh, funny thing about before there were telephones, if you happen to read that, there was a telephone at the store. And there were people lining up to use the telephone there because it was the only telephone in town for a while. And of course, the people in line could hear whatever anybody was saying on the phone. Just eavesdropping on that. Funny experiences like that. I think it was 1926 or something before people began to get their own phones. And my cousins that lived out in the country, a ways, like Alamos Road now is a road. But then it was a gravel lane. And so where the Rail Ranch School is, that was named for my family that lived out there. It was my grandfather's property, and they had a home there and all, but it was out Alamos Road, and I think that was the name of it, Alamos. You know, we didn't have names for roads when I was a kid.
Los Alamos Road there still today.
But I'm trying to think if that was the one where the Rail Ranch School is.
Oh, okay.
Anyway, that property was way, way out. I loved to go out there because they heated their home with a fireplace. We never had a fireplace. We had an oil heater because we lived in the town. And they had kerosene lanterns that were on the mantle of the fireplace. And that was just like, I don't know, it was so rustic, and they had knotty pine on the walls. We didn't have knotty pine on our walls. I just loved to go out there because it was so different. It seemed like you're going back in history just to go out and visit my aunt and uncle out there.
Well, let's talk about the Rail Ranch School a little bit then, if you...
That ranch was farmed by my oldest uncle, Ross Rail, and he lived out there on that property with my great-grandmother.
What was your grandmother?
This great-grandmother was Sarah Jane Parker.
Okay.
They all had come here from Iowa. And Sarah Jane Parker lived with my Uncle Ross out there before he was a married man. And she cooked and kept house while he farmed all that ranch. And I was talking to my cousin who grew up out there, and she said that it was pepper trees and eucalyptus trees on the hill, and then the hill kind of went down, and they, I don't know what they grew. Everything was grain. Grain. Okay. It was wheat, oats, barley, corn, those crops. And my dad talks about his only experience with hunting. And he gave it up because it broke his heart. He found a little rabbit, hadn't died. And he found it struggling, and he threw away the gun. He didn't want to have anything to do with the gun. And then trapping. They could trap certain animals for their pelts and so forth and sell them. I can't remember the story, I'm sorry. But they did that sort of thing. I'm trying to think what animals it might have been, wild fox or something. I'm not sure. So anyway, they sold those pelts, and they get a certain amount of money for it. So he did that out there on that ranch. But I don't really know too much about it. I know that my cousin had the benefit of horses. They had work horses that pulled wagons and things, even when I was a girl. And so they had that out there. And she went out to a school in the first place. So she was very young. She went out to a school out where Lake Skinner is now, that little school out there. And she rode horseback out there. She had an older brother, and when her brother was with her, she could ride bike out there. So that was quite a distance, I think, for a child to go. I think it was a 10-mile round trip. 5 miles out and 5 miles back every day. Well, you get your exercise. You don't have to worry about going on a diet. And then she later came into Murrieta Grammar School to finish through 8th grade, and she rode a horse from that ranch and tied it to a big old tree out at the far north end of the school property, and that horse was out there on a stake or a tree, and and it just had a rope circumference that it could graze and stuff. And she did that. I mean, when my dad was in school, there were a lot of people off of the plateau came down with horses and wagons. I mean, they had enough in the family. Say they had a family of 5 children who had to go to school. The older brother had the horse and the wagon, and away they came, and bumpity bump, because they weren't improved roads at all. I mean, a lot of rock and a lot of ruts and that sort of thing, bumpity bump, and away they go, and they'd have to park their wagon and their horse out there at the north end of that property on 2nd Avenue. And they had a little barn and stall there for a while, is what I understand. I never saw anything like that, but not my experience. But I don't know too much about the rail ranch.